My name is Jason Fairburn, and I used to think the worst thing about marriage was arguing over the thermostat. Turns out, I was wrong about a lot of things. It started on a Tuesday night in October. Laura came home at 11:30, claiming she'd been working late on the Henderson account again. The Henderson account that seemed to require more midnight oil than a 19th century lighthouse. She slipped into bed beside me, her phone clutched in her hand like a lifeline, the screen glowing against her face as she typed furiously. "Important client?" I asked, my voice thick with sleep and suspicion. She murmured, not looking up. "Crisis management. You know how it is." I knew how it was, all right. Laura Staples, marketing executive extraordinaire, had been managing a lot of crises lately. Most of them seemed to happen after regular business hours, and all of them required her undivided attention and a wardrobe that cost more than my monthly truck payment. The next morning, she rushed through her coffee, checking her phone every 30 seconds. When it buzzed with a message, she practically lunged for it, then froze when she saw me watching. "Work again?" I asked, stirring my eggs with deliberate slowness. "Always is." She forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Scott needs the quarterly projections revised." Scott, her boss, the man who apparently needed a lot of revising done at odd hours. Laura grabbed her purse and headed for the door, but in her haste, she left her phone charger plugged into the kitchen outlet, the same charger she normally guarded like state secrets. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. I'm a construction project manager, not a detective, but I've spent 20 years solving problems that other people create. And Laura had just created a problem she didn't even know about. That evening, I swapped her charger with mine. Simple mistake, right? The kind any distracted husband might make. When she plugged her phone into my charger that night, it wouldn't fit properly. She cursed under her breath, tried forcing it, then gave up and left the phone on her nightstand. "I'll charge it in the car tomorrow," she muttered, rolling over. But phones have a funny way of running out of power when you need them most. And Laura's phone, sitting there dark and silent, was about to tell me everything I needed to know. The next morning, after Laura left for work with her uncharged phone, I picked it up. Laura had always been careless with passwords, using the same 4 digits for everything. Our anniversary date. How romantic. The phone came to life in my hands, and suddenly I was looking at a conversation that made my stomach clench like a fist. Scott Williams, her boss, had sent her a message at 11:47 the previous night. "Can't stop thinking about last night. When can we do it again?" Laura's response, sent while she was lying next to me. "Soon. He's asleep. Wish you were here instead." I scrolled up, my hands shaking slightly. Weeks of messages. Months, maybe. Plans for hotel meetings. Intimate details I didn't want to read but couldn't stop reading. Photos I definitely didn't want to see. And then I found the money transfers. Scott had been sending Laura cash through a payment app. Hundreds of dollars at a time, labeled as bonus or project incentive. Payment for services rendered, apparently. I sat in my basement workshop, staring at the evidence of my wife's betrayal, and felt something cold and calculating settle in my chest. Laura thought she was so clever, so careful. She thought I was just another oblivious husband, too busy with construction schedules and weekend projects to notice what was happening right under my nose. She was about to learn how wrong she could be. I forwarded the most damaging messages to my own email, then deleted the sent items from her phone. I took screenshots of the money transfers and the photos. Then I plugged her phone into the correct charger and left it exactly where she'd abandoned it. When Laura came home that evening, she immediately grabbed her phone and started charging it. She scrolled through her messages, frowning slightly, probably wondering why Scott hadn't responded to whatever she'd sent from her office phone. "How was work?" I asked, my voice perfectly normal. "Oh, you know, same old chaos. Scott's been really demanding lately. I bet he has? She looked up sharply, but I was already turning back to the newspaper, my expression neutral. Let her wonder. Let her worry. Over the next few days, I watched Laura more carefully. The late nights, the new clothes, the way she guarded her phone like it contained nuclear launch codes. The hushed phone calls she took in the bathroom. The sudden interest in working weekends. I also started paying attention to Scott Williams. I'd met him a few times at company parties, a smooth-talking guy in his early 40s with perfect teeth and a handshake that lasted just a little too long. Married to Sophie Williams, a socialite who organized charity galas and looked like she could cut glass with her cheekbones. They lived in one of those glass and steel condos downtown, the kind with a doorman and a view of the harbor. Scott thought he was untouchable. Laura thought she was invisible. They were both about to discover that the most dangerous person in any room is the one nobody's paying attention to. I started making plans. The first thing I did was install a GPS tracker on Laura's car. My crew chief Nate helped me with that part, sliding the magnetic device under her bumper while she was inside getting her nails done. "You sure about this, Jason?" Nate asked, wiping his hands on a shop rag. "This feels like the kind of thing that ends badly for everybody." "It's already ended badly," I told him. "I'm just documenting the wreckage." Nate had worked construction with me for 8 years. He was loyal, discreet, and had a talent for creative problem-solving that came in handy when dealing with difficult contractors. He was also recently divorced himself, which meant he understood exactly why I was doing what I was doing. The tracker worked perfectly. Laura's lunch meetings with Scott showed up as visits to the Marriott downtown. Her late nights at the office were actually late nights at his condo. Her Saturday morning yoga classes were taking place in a part of town that didn't have any yoga studios. But tracking her movements was just the beginning. I needed allies, and I knew exactly where to find them. Diana Miller lived 3 streets over from us in a house she'd bought after her own divorce 6 months earlier. She was an orthodontist, smart and funny, with the kind of sharp wit that could cut through pretense like a scalpel. We'd started talking at neighborhood barbecues, bonding over our shared experience of having our trust obliterated by people we'd thought we knew. "I need a favor," I told her over coffee at the diner on Maple Street. "Actually, I need a partner in crime. The legal kind of crime." Diana stirred her coffee thoughtfully. "This is about Laura, isn't it? What gave it away? The fact that you look like someone who's been punched in the gut but is too stubborn to fall down." She leaned forward. "What did you find?" I told her everything. The messages, the money, the hotels. Diana listened without interrupting, her expression growing colder with each detail. "So what's the plan?" she asked when I finished. "Public humiliation, social destruction. I want them to lose everything that matters to them: reputation, respect, relationships. I want them to understand what it feels like to have your life torn apart by someone you trusted. And you need me, because Scott's wife Sophie is going to be at the Coastal Children's Charity Gala next Friday. You're going to accidentally bump into her and strike up a conversation about marriage and trust and how lucky she is to have such a devoted husband." Diana smiled, and it wasn't entirely pleasant. "I like it. What else?" "Laura's car is going to develop some embarrassing mechanical problems. Nothing dangerous, just mortifying. And Scott's going to discover that his perfect little secret isn't as secret as he thought." The first phase of my plan went into effect the following Monday. I'd spent the weekend in my workshop, tinkering with a small electronic device that Nate had helped me acquire from a friend who worked in automotive repair. It was designed to trigger a car's horn system at random intervals, particularly when the brakes were applied. Installing it took 5 minutes while Laura was in the shower. The device was small, magnetic, and virtually undetectable unless you knew exactly where to look. Laura discovered the problem on her way to work. I was already at the construction site when my phone rang. "Jason, something's wrong with my car," she said, her voice tight with frustration. The horn keeps going off every time I stop. People are staring at me. That's weird, I said, injecting just the right amount of concern into my voice. Maybe you should take it to the shop. I don't have time for this. I have 3 meetings today, including lunch with... She stopped herself. Including an important client. I'm sure Scott will understand if you're a few minutes late. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. I never said anything about Scott, she said finally. Didn't you? My mistake. You have so many important meetings these days, it's hard to keep track. That afternoon, I drove past the Marriott and saw Laura's car in the parking lot, horn blaring every time someone walked behind it and triggered the motion sensor I'd also installed. A small crowd had gathered to watch the spectacle, and I could see Laura and Scott through the lobby windows, both looking mortified. Phase 1 was complete. Phase 2 began that Friday night at Mickey's Tavern, the kind of neighborhood bar where everyone knew everyone else's business, and gossip spread faster than spilled beer. I'd arranged to meet Diana there for what looked like a casual drink between friends. What it actually was theater. Laura's best friend, Trish Carver, was there with her book club, occupying their usual corner booth and working their way through a pitcher of margaritas. Trish was the kind of person who collected secrets, like some people collected stamps, and she had a direct pipeline to Laura's office gossip network. Diana and I sat at the bar, close enough for Trish to overhear our conversation, but far enough away to make it seem accidental. I just don't understand how people can lie to their spouses, Diana said, her voice carrying just the right amount of righteous indignation. I mean, if you're unhappy, get a divorce. Don't sneak around like a teenager. Some people think they're too smart to get caught, I replied. They think they can have their cake and eat it too. Well, they usually find out they're wrong. Truth has a way of coming to light. I saw Trish's head turn slightly in our direction. Perfect. Diana leaned closer to me, her hand touching mine on the bar. You're a good man, Jason. Laura's lucky to have someone so loyal. I used to think I was the lucky one, I said, just loud enough for Trish to hear clearly. But lately I'm not so sure. Trish practically vibrated with curiosity. I could see her fingers twitching toward her phone, probably composing a text to Laura already. Diana and I finished our drinks and left, but not before I made sure Trish got a good look at us walking out together, Diana's hand resting lightly on my arm. My phone buzzed 20 minutes later. A text from Laura. Trish says you were at Mickey's with some woman. Who is she? I waited an hour before responding. Diana Miller. You remember her, right? The orthodontist from Elm Street? We were just talking about trust and marriage. Fascinating conversation. Laura called me immediately. What's that supposed to mean? She demanded. What's what supposed to mean? That comment about trust and marriage. Just making conversation. Diana's been through a rough divorce. Her husband was cheating on her for months before she found out. Can you imagine? Living with someone who's lying to your face every single day? Another long silence. Jason, is everything okay between us? Why wouldn't it be, Laura? We tell each other everything, right? No secrets between us? Of course not. No secrets. Good. I'm glad we understand each other. I hung up and smiled. Laura was starting to sweat, and I was just getting started. The next morning, I received a text from an unknown number. Stay away from my wife, and I'll stay away from yours. We don't want this to get messy. Scott Williams, trying to sound threatening. How adorable. I saved the number and sent back a simple response. I don't know what you're talking about, but thanks for the advice. Then I forwarded the message to Diana with a note. Phase 3 starts now. Scott Williams made his first mistake by threatening me. His second mistake was underestimating what a construction worker with 20 years of experience could do with basic electronics and a little creativity. I'd been watching his routine for 2 weeks. Every Tuesday and Thursday, Scott went to the gym at the Ocean View Athletic Club, leaving his BMW in the parking lot for exactly 90 minutes. The car was his pride and joy, a sleek black sedan that he washed every weekend and parked in 2 spaces to avoid door dings. That Tuesday morning, while Scott was inside doing whatever executives do on elliptical machines, Nate and I paid his car a visit. We didn't damage anything, didn't break any laws, we just made some modifications. The first modification was a small device attached to his horn, similar to the one I'd installed on Laura's car, but with a few creative enhancements. This one was programmed to activate whenever the car exceeded 25 miles per hour, which meant Scott's morning commute was going to be very interesting. The second modification was more artistic. We filled the air intake vents with biodegradable packing peanuts and a small amount of fish sauce, the kind used in Vietnamese cooking. The smell wouldn't be immediately noticeable, but once the air conditioning kicked in, Scott's luxury sedan was going to smell like a fishing boat on a hot day. The third modification was purely psychological. We left a small note under his windshield wiper. "Nice car. Hope nothing happens to it." I was back at the construction site when my phone rang. Diana's number. "You need to get to the Coastal Children's Charity Gala," she said without preamble. "I found Sophie Williams, and she's very interested in meeting you." The gala was being held at the Harbor View Hotel, one of those old money establishments where the cocktails cost more than most people's hourly wage. I cleaned up as best I could, put on my only decent suit, and drove downtown. Diana met me in the lobby, looking elegant in a black dress that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. "Sophie's at the bar," she said. "Tall, blonde, looks like she could freeze water with a glance." I told her I had a friend who might have some information about her husband's work habits. Sophie Williams was exactly as advertised. Beautiful, cold, and radiating the kind of controlled fury that comes from suspecting the worst and being proven right. She was nursing a martini and watching the crowd with the expression of someone who'd rather be anywhere else. "Mrs. Williams?" I approached carefully. "I'm Jason Fairburn. Diana said you might want to talk." Sophie turned to study me with ice-blue eyes that missed nothing. "You're Laura Staples' husband." "I am. And you know about my husband and your wife." "I do." She nodded slowly. "Show me." I pulled out my phone and opened the folder where I'd saved the screenshots. Sophie looked through them methodically, her expression never changing, but I noticed her grip tighten on her martini glass. "How long?" she asked when she finished. "At least 3 months, probably longer." "And you have proof of the money transfers?" "Everything. Messages, photos, financial records, enough to end both their careers and your marriage, if that's what you want." Sophie smiled, and it was like watching winter arrive early. "Mr. Fairburn, I think we're going to be very good friends." We talked for another 20 minutes, sharing information and coordinating our next moves. Sophie, it turned out, was not the helpless socialite wife she appeared to be. She had her own money, her own connections, and a very clear understanding of exactly how to destroy someone's reputation in our small city. "There's a waterfront festival this weekend," she said, as we prepared to leave. "I think it would be lovely if all 4 of us attended. Together." I was driving home when my phone rang. Laura, and she sounded panicked. "Jason, where are you?" "Driving home from a work thing. Why?" "Trish saw you at the Harbor View Hotel with that woman again, the orthodontist. What were you doing there?" "Having a drink, talking. You know, the kind of thing married people used to do with each other." "This isn't funny, Jason. People are starting to talk." "Let them talk. I'm not doing anything wrong." "Then why won't you tell me what's going on?" I pulled into our driveway and sat in the truck for a moment, looking at our house, our home, the place where Laura had been lying to me for months while planning her future with another man. "What's going on, Laura, is that I'm tired of being taken for granted. I'm tired of being treated like a piece of furniture. I'm tired of feeling like a stranger in my own marriage. Jason, save it. We'll talk when you're ready to be honest. Really honest." I hung up and went inside. Laura was waiting in the kitchen, her phone in her hand, her face pale. "We need to talk," she said. Yes, we do, but not tonight. Tonight I'm going to bed, and tomorrow I'm going to the waterfront festival. You're welcome to join me if you want to meet some new people. What people? Friends. The kind of people who believe in honesty and loyalty. You might find them interesting. Laura stared at me like I'd grown a second head. I don't understand what's happening here. You will, I said. Very soon, you will. That night, I lay in bed listening to Laura whisper into her phone in the bathroom, probably warning Scott that something was wrong, that I was acting strange, that they needed to be more careful. They had no idea how careful they needed to be. The next morning, I got a call from Nate. You need to see this, he said, laughing. Scott Williams just pulled into the parking lot at his office building, and his car sounds like a parade float with a broken horn. There's a crowd gathering. I drove downtown and parked across the street from Scott's building. Sure enough, there was Scott, standing next to his BMW while a small crowd watched his car honk continuously. His face was red with embarrassment and anger, and I could see him gesturing frantically at the valet, trying to explain what was happening. Then the wind shifted, and even from across the street, I caught a whiff of fish sauce. Scott's second mistake was about to become his third. As I watched, he pulled out his phone and made a call. 30 seconds later, my phone rang. This is your last warning. Scott's voice was tight with rage. Fix whatever you did to my car and stay away from my wife, or I'll make your life very difficult. I don't know what you're talking about, I said calmly. But I'm curious about something. Does Laura know you're threatening her husband? Because that seems like the kind of thing that might upset her. You don't know what you're dealing with. Actually, I think I do. I think I'm dealing with a man who's been having an affair with my wife for months, paying her for services rendered, and now trying to intimidate me because he's scared his perfect little secret is falling apart. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. The Waterfront Festival is this Saturday, I continued. You and Sophie should come. Laura and I will be there. It'll be fun. We can all get to know each other better. I hung up and smiled. Scott Williams was about to learn that threatening a construction worker was like poking a sleeping bear with a stick. The bear was awake now, and it was very, very hungry. Saturday morning dawned clear and cold, perfect weather for the annual Oceanside Waterfront Festival. Laura spent an hour getting ready, changing clothes 3 times and checking her phone every 5 minutes. Are you sure you want to go to this? She asked for the 4th time as we walked toward the festival grounds. We could just stay home, order pizza, watch a movie. I'm sure, I said. I think it'll be educational. The festival was crowded, full of families and couples enjoying the craft booths, food trucks, and live music. Laura relaxed slightly as we blended into the crowd, probably thinking she was safe in such a public setting. She was wrong. I spotted Diana first, standing near the lobster roll stand with Sophie Williams. They were dressed casually, like any other festival goers, but I could see the predatory alertness in their eyes. Oh, look, I said to Laura, there's Diana, and she's with someone I'd like you to meet. Before Laura could object, I was steering her through the crowd toward the 2 women. Laura's steps slowed as we got closer, some instinct warning her that she was walking into a trap. Laura, I said cheerfully, I'd like you to meet Sophie Williams. Sophie, this is my wife Laura. Sophie extended a perfectly manicured hand and smiled like a shark scenting water. Laura Staples, I've heard so much about you. Laura shook the offered hand uncertainly. I'm sorry, do we know each other? Not yet, but I know your boss very well. Scott Williams is my husband. The color drained from Laura's face so quickly I thought she might faint. She looked around frantically, probably hoping Scott was nearby to rescue her, but he was nowhere to be seen. Your husband? Laura's voice came out as a whisper. 15 years this December, Sophie said conversationally. Though lately he's been working such long hours, All those late-night meetings and weekend conferences, you must know how demanding the marketing business can be. Diana stepped closer, effectively boxing Laura in. Sophie was just telling me about some of Scott's recent projects. The Henderson account sounds particularly challenging. Laura's mouth opened and closed, like a fish gasping for air. She looked at me desperately, silently begging for rescue, but I just smiled and put my arm around her shoulders. "Isn't this nice?" I said. "Getting to know the families of the people you work with. It really helps you understand the whole picture." "I should go," Laura said quickly. "I just remembered I have to—" "Oh, don't leave on my account," Sophie interrupted. "I was hoping we could chat. I have so many questions about my husband's work habits. For instance, he's been receiving some very interesting text messages lately. Perhaps you could help me understand what they mean." Laura went completely still. "I don't know what you're talking about." Sophie pulled out her phone and began scrolling through screenshots. "Let me refresh your memory. Can't stop thinking about last night. When can we do it again? That was sent to someone in your office at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. Does that ring any bells?" The crowd continued to move around us, families enjoying their Saturday afternoon, completely unaware of the drama unfolding near the lobster rolls. Laura looked around desperately, like a trapped animal seeking escape. "I think there's been a misunderstanding," she said weakly. "Oh, I don't think so," Sophie replied. "I think everything is perfectly clear. My husband has been having an affair with you for months, paying you money through digital transfers and meeting you at hotels during business hours. The only misunderstanding was mine, thinking I was married to a man with some semblance of integrity." Diana moved to Laura's other side. "The question is, what are we going to do about it?" That's when Scott appeared, pushing through the crowd with the frantic energy of a man who knew his world was collapsing. He took in the scene at a glance, his wife confronting his mistress, while the mistress's husband watched with obvious satisfaction. "Sophie," he said carefully, "what are you doing here?" "Having a conversation with your colleague," Sophie replied without turning around. "We were just discussing your work schedule." Scott looked at me, his face flushed with anger and panic. "You son of a—" "Careful," I interrupted. "There are families around, children present. Wouldn't want to cause a scene." "You're the one causing a scene," Scott snapped. "This is harassment." "This is conversation," Diana corrected, "between spouses who deserve to know the truth about their marriages." A small crowd was beginning to gather, drawn by the obvious tension. I recognized several faces from the neighborhood, including Mrs. Patterson from the grocery store and Bob Martinez from the hardware shop. In a town this size, gossip traveled faster than wildfire. Laura grabbed Scott's arm. "We need to leave, now." "Yes," Sophie agreed. "You should definitely leave, together. It'll give people something to talk about." Scott's face went from red to purple. "You can't prove anything." I pulled out my phone and opened the photo gallery. "Actually, we can prove everything. Would you like me to start with the hotel receipts or the text messages?" "You hacked her phone," Scott accused. "That's illegal." "I used her password," I corrected. "The one she's been using for everything for the past 5 years. Our anniversary date. How romantic, right?" Laura made a small, strangled sound. Sophie stepped closer to her husband. "Scott, darling, I think it's time we had a very public conversation about our marriage. Right here, right now, in front of all these nice people." "Sophie, please." "Please what? Please pretend I don't know you've been cheating on me? Please act like I haven't seen the evidence? Please continue to humiliate myself while you carry on with your secretary?" "She's not my secretary," Scott said automatically. Wrong answer. Sophie's smile could have cut diamond. "You're right. Secretaries get paid for their services through official channels. What do you call someone who gets paid for personal services through private money transfers?" The crowd around us had grown larger, and I could see phones coming out, people recording what was obviously going to be the juiciest gossip in town for months. Laura finally found her voice. "This is insane. You're all insane." "What's insane," I said calmly, "is thinking you could lie to everyone who cared about you and never face any consequences. What's insane," Diana added, "is believing you were smarter than everyone else." "What's insane," Sophie finished, "is destroying 2 marriages for a middle-aged man with a receding hairline and a BMW that smells like rotten fish." Scott's hand went instinctively to his head, and several people in the crowd laughed. Laura looked around desperately, realizing that her secret was now public knowledge, that by Monday morning, everyone in town would know exactly what she'd been doing. "I want a divorce," Sophie announced loudly enough for everyone to hear, "and I want half of everything, including that ridiculous car." "Sophie, we can work this out," Scott pleaded. "The only thing we're working out is the division of assets. I'll be keeping the house, the boat, and my dignity. You can keep your girlfriend and your shame." Laura turned to me, tears streaming down her face. "Jason, please, can we go home and talk about this?" I looked at her for a long moment, this woman I'd loved and trusted for 15 years, who'd thrown away our marriage for hotel meetings and secret payments. "There's nothing left to talk about, Laura. You made your choice months ago." I turned and walked away, leaving her standing there with Scott, while the crowd watched and whispered and took pictures. Diana fell into step beside me, and I could hear Sophie behind us, still talking loudly about divorce lawyers and asset division. "That went well," Diana said as we reached the parking area. "That was just the opening act," I replied. "The real show starts Monday morning." My phone was already buzzing with text messages from people who'd witnessed the confrontation. By evening, the story would be all over town. By Monday, it would be all over Laura's office. Laura and Scott had wanted excitement, wanted to feel alive, wanted to break the rules without consequences. They were about to discover that every rule has a price, and the bill was coming due. Monday morning arrived like Judgment Day. I was at the construction site by 7, but my phone had been buzzing since 6 with calls and messages from people who'd heard about the festival confrontation. In a town the size of ours, weekend gossip became Monday morning entertainment. Laura had spent Sunday locked in the guest bedroom, coming out only to make hushed phone calls that I pretended not to overhear. Scott had called the house twice, both times hanging up when I answered. At 8:30, my phone rang. "Diana." "You need to hear this," she said without preamble. "Sophie filed for divorce this morning. She also called Scott's company and requested a meeting with the board of directors about inappropriate workplace conduct." "How do you know all this?" "Sophie and I had breakfast. She's very thorough when she's angry. She also mentioned that someone leaked photos from the festival to the local Facebook groups. Scott and Laura are famous." I pulled out my phone and checked the Oceanside community page. Sure enough, there were multiple posts about the drama at the Waterfront Festival, complete with photos of Laura's face when Sophie introduced herself, and Scott's expression when he realized he'd been caught. The comment section was brutal. Small towns don't forgive public humiliation easily. At 9:15, Laura called me. "Jason, I need you to come home, now." "I'm at work. Please. There are reporters here." "Reporters?" "Someone called the newspaper about what happened at the festival. They want a statement about the affair." I almost laughed. The Oceanside Gazette was hardly the Washington Post, but in a town of 12,000 people, making the front page of the local paper was social execution. "Tell them the truth," I said. "You're very good at creative storytelling." "Jason, please. I know you're angry, but this is destroying everything. My job, my reputation, our marriage." "You destroyed our marriage. I'm just making sure everyone knows about it." I hung up and got back to work, but my concentration was shot. Every few minutes, someone would approach with a comment or question about the festival incident. Word was spreading that Scott Williams, the hotshot marketing executive, had been caught cheating on his socialite wife with a married employee. At lunch, Nate brought me a copy of the Gazette's online edition. The headline read, "Local Executives Affair Exposed at Public Festival." Below it was a photo of Scott and Laura standing together while Sophie confronted them, both looking guilty and trapped. The article was surprisingly detailed, quoting several festival attendees who'd witnessed the confrontation. Someone had provided the reporter with information about the money transfers and hotel meetings, someone who had access to very specific details about the affair. Someone like Sophie Williams, who clearly understood the value of public relations. My phone rang again. This time it was Trish, Laura's friend from the office. "Jason, what the heck is going on? Laura's not answering her phone, and there are rumors flying around the office that she and Scott were having an affair." "Are they rumors if they're true?" I asked. Silence. Then, "Oh my God, it's real?" "Very real, for months." "But she's married, you guys have kids, how could she—" Trish's voice trailed off as the implications hit her. "Good question, you should ask her." "I can't believe this. I mean, I knew she'd been acting strange lately, all secretive and distracted, but I never thought—" "Scott Williams? Really?" "Really. That's so gross. He's like old enough to be her father, and married to Sophie Williams, who could buy and sell this entire town." Apparently that didn't matter to Laura. Trish was quiet for a moment. "Jason, I'm sorry. I had no idea. If I'd known what she was doing—" "You would have what? Talked her out of it? Convinced her to think about her family?" "I don't know. Something." "It's not your fault, Trish. Adults make their own choices." After I hung up, I sat in my truck and thought about choices. Laura had chosen Scott over our marriage. Scott had chosen excitement over his reputation. They'd both chosen to believe they were smarter than everyone else, that they could keep their secret forever. Now they were learning that secrets have a way of demanding payment, with interest. That afternoon, Sophie called me directly. "Scott's been fired," she announced without preamble. That was fast. The board didn't appreciate having their company associated with a public scandal. Apparently, several major clients called this morning asking about the inappropriate workplace conduct mentioned in the newspaper. And Laura? Also fired. For cause, which means no severance package. Something about misuse of company resources and violation of the employee conduct policy. I felt a grim satisfaction. Laura had always been proud of her career, her independence, her ability to support herself. She'd thrown it all away for hotel afternoons with a married man who'd just thrown her away to save himself. "There's more," Sophie continued. "I've filed a civil lawsuit against both of them for intentional infliction of emotional distress and alienation of affection. My lawyer says we have an excellent case." Alienation of affection? It's an old law, but it's still on the books in this state. When someone deliberately interferes with a marriage, the injured spouse can sue for damages. How much damages? Enough to make them remember this mistake for the rest of their lives. That evening, I drove home to find Laura's car in the driveway, but the house was dark except for the kitchen light. I found her sitting at the table, staring at her laptop screen with red-rimmed eyes. "I've been fired," she said without looking up. "I heard. Sophie Williams is suing us. I heard that too. The story's been picked up by the Portland paper. My parents saw it online." Laura's parents were old-fashioned Maine people who believed in marriage, family, and keeping your private business private. They were probably mortified. "What did they say?" I asked. "They hung up on me." Laura finally looked at me, and for the first time, I saw something in her eyes I'd never noticed before. Absolute defeat, the kind of despair that sinks deep into your soul and leaves no room for hope. "I've lost everything," she whispered, her voice so soft it was barely audible. "My job, my friends, my family. Even Scott won't return my calls anymore." I couldn't help the bitterness that crept into my voice. "What did you expect, Laura? That he'd leave his wife for you? That you'd both run off into the sunset, happy ever after? She didn't answer right away. Her face was pale, like she hadn't slept or eaten in days, but there was a moment of uncertainty in her eyes before she spoke again. I don't know what I expected. I wasn't thinking clearly at the time. You were thinking clearly enough to hide this from me for months, I shot back. You were thinking clearly enough to accept his money, to meet him in secret, to pretend like none of this was going to blow up in your face eventually. She flinched as if my words physically struck her, her eyes brimming with tears. I know you hate me. I don't hate you, I replied, though the words tasted bitter on my tongue. Hate requires caring, and I don't care about you anymore. You're just a stranger who happens to live in my house. Her face crumpled, as if the weight of my words had shattered something inside her. Jason, please, I know I made mistakes, but we can fix this, can't we? We can go to counseling. We can start over. I shook my head, my heart heavy with the truth I knew she wasn't ready to hear. There's no fixing this, Laura. No starting over. You made your choice. You chose Scott Williams over our marriage, over everything we built, and now you get to live with that choice. I turned away from her, leaving her sitting at the kitchen table, broken and alone. Upstairs, I started packing a bag. I'd already made arrangements to stay with Diana for a few days while I figured out where I was going to live. The house would have to be sold once the lawyers got involved anyway. As I packed, I could hear her crying downstairs, her sobs echoing through the quiet house. I imagined her calling friends, trying to find someone who would listen, someone who would understand her side of the story. But what did she expect? Her friends had seen the newspaper article, heard about the confrontation at the festival, listened to the whispers around town. In a place like this, where everyone knows everything about everyone, reputation was everything, and Laura's reputation was beyond repair. My phone buzzed, pulling me out of my thoughts. It was a text from Diana. How are you holding up? I typed back quickly. Better than expected. Justice feels good. Her reply came almost instantly. Sophie wants to take us to dinner tomorrow, to celebrate. I raised an eyebrow as I read her message. Celebrate what? Her response was simple, but filled with conviction. The fact that cheaters never prosper, and the truth always comes out. I put the phone down and looked around the room I'd shared with Laura for the past 15 years. The photos on the dresser, the mementos of a life we'd built together, all now felt like reminders of something lost. The life we'd had wasn't enough for her, and it never would have been. Tomorrow, I would start over. I would build a new life for myself, one based on honesty, trust, and mutual respect. Tonight, I would sleep peacefully for the first time in months, knowing that Laura and Scott had finally received what they deserved. The wages of secrets had been paid in full, and I was finally free.